Here's what you need to understand before I go any further. America's closest allies, the countries that share our language, legal systems, intelligence, and have fought alongside us on every major battlefield since World War I, are right now, as you're watching this, building a world that doesn't rely on us, not against us, but without us. That's a crucial distinction that's going to haunt this country for generations to come. For the first time in my lifetime, I'm looking at a map and seeing that the countries shaded in blue, Britain, Canada, Australia, are no longer facing Washington. They're looking toward each other. Beijing, Brussels, Tokyo, basically anywhere but the nation that used to be their indispensable partner. Let me take you to Davos, Switzerland, January 2026, the World Economic Forum. Every year, world leaders fly in, deliver optimistic speeches full of hollow words, and then fly home. Nothing changes. That's always been the game. But this time, Mark Carney walked to the podium. If you don't know who Mark Carney is, you need to fix that immediately. He ran the Bank of Canada, then the Bank of England, and he's a Goldman Sachs veteran, arguably the most credentialed central banker of his generation. This man doesn't deal in drama. He deals in spreadsheets, frameworks, and systems. When Carney speaks, it's not just rhetoric, it's a structural declaration. At that podium, what he said wasn't a typical optimistic nothing. It was a declaration of fact. He said, the rules-based international order is experiencing, and here's the key word, a rupture. Not a transition, not a rough patch, a rupture. He continued, the bargain that held the Western world together, where America provided security and stability in exchange for global cooperation, no longer works. And then he uttered words that are now being discussed in every foreign ministry. The middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. A man who has spent his entire career building financial systems just told every mid-sized democracy on earth that the United States has become a predator, not a partner. And he said that out loud, on camera, in front of the entire world. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Carney didn't just give a speech. He showed up at Davos with receipts. Reports now confirm that Canada is actively leading negotiations between the European Union and the CPTPP, Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is a multi-nation Indo-Pacific trade bloc that includes Canada, the UK, Japan, Australia, Mexico, Singapore, and Vietnam, aiming to create one of the largest economic alliances in human history. We're talking about a potential bloc of 1.5 billion people, covering over a third of global trade, all built entirely without the United States. Think about that number, 1.5 billion people, operating within a trade framework so tightly interwoven that products made with components from Canada, Japan, and Vietnam can move across 40 countries with minimal tariffs. An economic superhighway that bypasses American ports, banks, regulators, and political volatility completely. And it's already happening. This isn't a think tank proposal, this is happening right now. Now let me explain why this matters. While Carney was creating this, Keir Starmer, Britain's Prime Minister, was flying to Beijing, not London, not Washington, but Beijing, to sit down with the Chinese government and talk trade. The same Britain that has been America's closest ally for 80 years, the same Britain whose intelligence agency, GCHQ, is the backbone of the Five Eyes network, just walked into Beijing and said, let's do business. Canada did the same. Carney went to Beijing and struck a deal, removing trade barriers on Chinese electric vehicles and Canadian canola oil. The two countries that Trump has been bullying just walked to his biggest rival and said, let's trade. But here's the real kicker. None of this happened in a vacuum. There is a direct, documented cause and effect between Donald Trump's actions toward these nations and the decisions they're now making. This didn't just happen randomly. It was predictable. Some people in Washington predicted it, but nobody listened. So let's break this down. How did America dismantle its relationship with its closest allies in just 12 months? It's actually not that complicated. You just have to be Donald Trump. Start with Canada. Trump spent months calling Canada a freeloading semi-state, threatening 25% tariffs across the board, calling Prime Minister Carney weak, and publicly suggesting Canada should become the 51st state. He demanded control of the Gordio International Bridge, a bridge that Canada built, claiming that the U.S. deserved ownership of infrastructure it didn't fund. A U.S. senator from Michigan warned that blocking that bridge would devastate her state's economy. Trump didn't care. The result? Canada's economy shrank 1.6% in the second quarter of 2025. Unemployment rose above 7%, factories cut production, and export revenues collapsed. But here's the thing nobody's talking about. Canada didn't break. It pivoted. Carney announced 12 new trade and security agreements across 4 continents in just 6 months. While Trump was threatening tariffs, Carney was securing billions in investments for Canada in AI and energy sectors, building bridges in Europe, and opening doors in Asia. He's even scheduled to visit Australia in March 2026 to deepen supply chain cooperation, structured to function without American involvement. Trump made a move that any competent chess player knows is fatal. He pressured every piece on the board simultaneously, and the pieces moved. Now let's look at Australia. The US and Australia have deep military intelligence and historical ties. The US-Australia Trilateral Security Partnership was supposed to be the cornerstone of Indo-Pacific strategy. Then Trump slapped a 10% baseline tariff on Australia, a country with which the US has a trade surplus and a nation that has sent soldiers to fight in every American military engagement since World War I. When a US senator asked why Australia was being hit with tariffs despite their alliance, the response from Trump's administration was that the US should run up the score on Australia. This wasn't trade policy, it was contempt. Australian polls now show that more Australians view Donald Trump as a threat to world peace than Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping. This is an extraordinary collapse of trust. And when you lose trust with Australia, you don't just lose a trading partner. You lose a critical surveillance network, intelligence stations, and military collaboration that gives the U.S. a global edge. And now, the so-called ZAC movement, the proposed formal alliance between Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, is moving from an academic idea to a serious policy platform with bipartisan support in all 4 countries. The support is growing, and the idea is gaining momentum. In Canada, 57% of the population now believes that a formal alliance with Britain and Australia is a way to protect themselves from American economic pressure. A formal alliance that just a few years ago would have been unthinkable. This is not just about tariffs anymore. Tariffs are the symptom. The real issue is trust. Once broken, trust doesn't heal quickly. It takes a generation or longer. Right now, America's closest allies are building their own future, one where American partnership is optional, not essential. The U.S. dollar's global dominance is also slipping. The share of global foreign exchange reserves held in U.S. dollars has fallen from 72% in 2000 to under 60% today. This isn't a sudden drop. It's a gradual decline. And every time a country decides to bypass the U.S. dollar in trade, that number drops further. Every trade agreement that operates without the U.S. dollar pushes it further down the slope. And when countries need fewer U.S. dollars, they buy fewer U.S. Treasury bonds. When demand for Treasury bonds drops, yields rise, and that means higher borrowing costs for the U.S. If this continues, American exporters will lose market share, and American consumers will face higher costs. This is the structural shift taking place right now. America's closest allies are no longer looking to Washington for guidance. They're building their own systems, and the question remains, will this administration realize what it has set in motion before it becomes permanent? Let me know what you think.